as I was never ceased to marvel at the transformation that's taken place with Zoom. It's just so easy, and previously really was easy, but now it's just so expected that I can be in Dallas this morning. So I'm really happy to be here. So Maitri suggested that I dive into the yugas because it's a perennially favorite subject among Ananda folks. So for those of you, if there's any of you, and I'm not sure if I'm speaking to anyone who hasn't already got a basic idea of the yugas, but nonetheless, I'll start there. So the yugas are a concept that comes to us from India of a cyclic pattern of human development rather than the linear pattern that is the accepted view in science and archaeology. So that the linear view or the Darwinian view is that man has slowly evolved to where he is today, starting 8,000–10,000 years ago as hunter-gatherers and gradually gaining more skills, began to build cities, etc. And now we are at the pinnacle of development, maybe not the end of development, but the pinnacle of development so far. Whereas the yugas show us a cyclic pattern where there were higher ages in the past and there will be higher ages yet in the future. And in the Indian system, they break this big cycle down into 4 ages. And the most spiritual age is Satya Yuga. And then devolving from that is Treta Yuga. Devolving from that is Dwapara Yuga. And then finally, the lowest age is Kali Yuga. And according to Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, we are now in the ascending Dwapara Yuga. So each age has particular characteristics, and the ones that Sri Yukteswar explained the most is perception. So in the lowest age, he said that mankind as a whole, and meaning that there would be exceptions to that rule, but that mankind as a whole would only be able to perceive what the senses tell them. And so it would be an age in which material consciousness is at its greatest. Rising into Dwapara Yuga, Sri Yukteswar said that mankind as a whole would begin to be able to perceive subtler energies and to comprehend the notion that underlying matter is energy, and that there actually is no enduring reality that is matter, because matter is just an expression of energy. So this has come to be known as the energy age. And then in the Treta Yuga time, mankind as a whole would be able to perceive and comprehend thought and understand that thought underlies matter. Underlies energy, which underlies matter. And so it's a more basic reality than energy is. And that during Treta Yuga, mankind as a whole would communicate telepathically. And then finally, arriving at Satya Yuga, mankind as a whole would be able to comprehend that spirit or God underlies thought, which underlies energy, which underlies matter. So as we progress up this ladder of increasing awareness and abilities, we go from matter-centric awareness to spirit-centered awareness in 12,000 years. We peak at the end of 12,000 years, and then we begin to descend and go back through those same ages, but in reverse. And that cycle of 24,000 years continues indefinitely as long as the Earth and the solar system are here. So a common question, and one that Maitri wanted me to focus in on about the yugas is, what does it mean for us today? It's an intriguing subject. People like to know about past evidence of the yugas and the Great Pyramid and other things like that. And you all may share that fascination, and I had that fascination. But when it comes to what it does for us today, it is very interesting, and it is significant. And the way I like to describe it is that Dwapara Yuga has a gift for mankind, and it has a challenge for mankind. So the gift of Dwapara is that mankind as a whole understands, comprehends that energy underlies matter. But the true gift, the true knowledge that will emerge gradually as the next 2,000 years of Dwapara Yuga unfold, is that it's not just a outer reality that energy underlies matter. It's also an inner reality. And that inner reality is perceivable by those who choose to look. And that inner reality is life force. So you've probably all done this thing where you rub your hands together and then pull your hands sort of slowly apart, move them back and forth together, and you'll begin to feel that there's something there between the palms of your hands. And it feels like it's some kind of energy, some kind of reality. So this is an interesting demonstration of our ability to perceive subtle energy. And I believe, but I have no way to prove it, but I believe that in Kali Yuga, mankind as a whole would not have felt anything if they did that. If they pulled their hands apart, they'd just think, why am I doing this? There's nothing there. There's no matter there. I can't perceive it. So therefore there is nothing there. And I believe that's because the nervous systems of the people born into incarnating in Kali Yuga just weren't refined enough to perceive that. And so our nervous systems are more refined, and therefore we're able to perceive things that 500 years ago would not have been possible. And then come Treta Yuga, after Dwapara Yuga, our nervous systems would be even more refined to the point where we can directly perceive thought. So what that gift is for today, where we are in Dwapara Yuga, of greater sensitivity and awareness of subtle energy, is that it opens up the possibility for us to use meditation to feel the life force moving in our bodies when we do yoga postures, to do energization exercises and directly send subtle energy into the body and drawing it out of the cosmic source of energy that surrounds us. And if we look back to descending Dwapara Yuga, so that would have been, say, 3,000 years ago, roughly, in the period of, say, 900 BC, 1000 BC, before the end of descending Dwapara Yuga, which ends at 700 BC. The things that people used commonly were meditation, were subtle energy healing through medicine, things like acupuncture, those existed in descending Dwapara Yuga because they had the same awareness that we do, and therefore awareness of subtle energy, and therefore they put it to use, and then they developed these techniques. And then those techniques just died out for the most part in Kali Yuga because they meant nothing to people. They were too subtle for them to comprehend. But now that we're back into Dwapara Yuga and we're in the era when we can perceive those things, then meditation came to the fore. Yoga postures came to the fore. Tai Chi came to the fore. All these things that had previously been practiced are now being practiced again because we're ready for them. So that's the big gift of Dwapara Yuga for us, is that we can control our life force. We can use pranayama to control our life force. And by controlling it, we can learn to take our awareness and concentration within and feel the presence of spirit deep within our being. And this is powerful, and it's going to get bigger as Dwapara Yuga unfolds in the next 2,000 years. More and more people will embrace the inner life. Yogananda said that the religion of Kali Yuga was about commandments. Thou shalt this, thou shalt not. And it was very formulaic and ritualistic. But in Dwapara Yuga, he said that religion will be experiential and that it will be natural for it to be experiential because we have this gift that allows us to actually experience more subtle realities, ultimately even to experience God directly. And this will just grow and grow and grow as Dwapara Yuga unfolds in the future. Where we are now, though, we are in the minority. Those of us who are interested in this are still in the minority, although I have to say it's exploding in some ways much more rapidly than I would have guessed. There's something like 40 or 50 million people in America who have tried or practiced meditation. There's even more people who do yoga postures. The worldwide figures must be even greater. I probably can't pull them together because there may be no, polls or statistics available. But the world is awakening. Mankind is awakening to subtle realities. That's the gift. The challenge for us is that Dwapara Yuga in general is not a very enlightened age. Master said, and Swami amplified on it, that the 4 yugas correspond to the 4 castes. So the caste system in India has become hereditary, and it's essentially meaningless now. It's a straitjacket that country has to work its way out of in time. But it started as just a simple recognition that not everybody was equally spiritually aware, and that those who were least spiritually aware, the Shudras, were the kind of people who didn't bother to even try to comprehend subtle energy. And their whole motivation in life was just to get as much of material pleasure as they possibly could. Then the next caste up is the Vaishya, and the Vaishya is associated with being businessmen, being store owners. And the reason why it's associated is because it's in that stage of human development that we develop the will to try to get as much of what we want for ourselves as we can. And so we tend to accumulate possessions. We tend to try to have as much pleasure through whatever senses as we possibly can. And if we have enough energy and magnetism, we try to mold the environment around us to suit our likes and dislikes. So that environment could be just simply our house, or it could be our house and grounds, or we could become more powerful and we could try to shape the politics of the local community, or we could try to be eventually president and try to shape an entire country. And if it's a powerful country like America, we're trying to shape the world. But it's always from this Vaishya lens that everything is perceived, which is self-interest, trying to bring a particular view of what's best for the world, which is a product of what is viewed as best for oneself, into manifestation. So if you understand the Vaishya point of view, and if you understand that Dwapara Yuga is Vaishya age, it's much easier to understand why the world is unfolding the way it is, and why we're in the midst of the kind of craziness that we're in on multiple fronts, is that we have billions of self-interested people whose self-interests don't necessarily align, and who tend to think that having for themselves is more important than sharing what they have, and that if having involves taking, then taking is justifiable. One of the aspects of the Vaishya view of life and the practice of life is it's pretty amoral. It's not really guided by a code of right and wrong. That really doesn't come along until you reach the Kshatriya stage, which is synonymous with Treta Yuga. And then finally, there's the Brahmin stage of the caste system that manifests more in Satya Yuga. So for us here, we're surrounded by a world in which self-interest is supreme. And it can be very confusing if you're sincerely interested in helping the world and changing the world, that there are so many headwinds to trying to make that happen, which to us is a self-evidently better way to live, is if we love and take care of all those around us, and that we live honorably and willing to self-sacrifice to help others. And yet it just doesn't happen around us. So that's the challenge, is that for those of us who have embraced spiritual teachings, for those of us who have embraced seeking God, the world around us is thousands of years away from conforming to that ideal. So the challenge for us is to proceed anyway, to serve, not because we have a real solid chance of transforming society in major ways. Minor ways, yes, important minor ways, because that's part of this gradual development, this gradual evolution of Dwapara towards a more inward understanding. And so we need to do what we do, but we also have to understand that those who have ears to hear and eyes to see are going to be few, that we're going to grow very, very incrementally in our ability to change the world around us. But that's also a gift for us, because it teaches us non-attachment. You do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because there's some clear and obvious gain or even accomplishment that comes from it, but because when you live in attunement to what's trying to happen on a higher level, you become elevated, you become transformed. And ultimately, that's all we're ever able to do in this world, is transform ourselves. The other gift, I think, part that goes along with the attunement to subtle energy that I think is important for us also to embrace is that as individuals, we can become, and we should learn to become, more powerful. Not because we want to be powerful beings and show off and vie with other powerful beings, but so that we can manifest God's power that is innate to the soul. We grow our soul awareness until we become one with God. And if we don't grow our soul awareness, then we'll be always stuck in the level of soul awareness we have developed. And part of the soul is incredibly powerful. And we just have no idea. Swami said that in the causal regions, when souls have evolved up through from being on the earth to being in the astral regions and finally into the causal regions, that as causal beings, we can create entire universes. This is hard to even fathom. If we did it, I'm imagining that we would do it in complete attunement with God's will. But nonetheless, the impetus and the power would flow through that soul as part of their development and growth to understand that they are God, that there is no separation between them and God. So for us here in Dwapara, although we're not going to be creating any universes anytime soon, at least I'm not, but I do try to create and be a channel for things that will help move the work forward, will help others understand the teachings. And to do that, we all need to become more powerful. We need to learn to let that energy that we can perceive come to us and through us. And we need to take our energization exercises seriously and realize that through them, we can attain the awareness that we are nothing but energy, that there is no body. We are the energy behind the body, and we are in that energy a part of God. So just because we're not going to transform the world in a complete way, create an Eden on earth in our lifetime, we can still change things. We can still improve the world. And in so doing, we are changed and we develop into greater and greater awareness of God. And this sort of cycles back to the reading today about self-reliance with a small s or self-reliance with a capital S. That we have a choice to do both. Because we are powerful beings, we can do a lot without any attunement to God and Guru. You look at people who are self-interested, but who have accomplished enormous things, and they've done it with the power of the self. They don't know, for the most part, that they are using their soul powers, but they are. But they're using it for very narrowly focused, narrow intentions that are for self-interest. If we take this gift of Dwapara and attune that to God and Guru, then our self-reliance can become so much greater. Our self can empower us so much more than if we just stayed focused on what we want or we need or think we should have. And again, that's the gift. You've got the gift of awareness. You've got the gift of energy. You've got the gift of helping transform, helping to evolve to a para yuga, to greater and greater awareness of spirit. And you do that through that self with a capital S reliance, and let God work through you. You know, you have to take the lead and let God work through you. I was thinking about how we have these bodies and we have convictions about how our bodies function. And in particular, we have convictions about whether our own body is well or not well, energized or not energized. We hold these very strongly. And I realized that God is constantly creating our body. It's God's power. And it's the infinite intelligence behind the life force that is creating our body, that is all God. And yet the body that's being created is according to our specifications. God is not going to suddenly heal us and create a super body, because we're in charge of that. That's our free will. So we're specifying without knowing it through our convictions, the health and energy levels of our body. So we also do this in our service. So God is coming through. God is the doer. God is the server. But we're specifying how much God is going to come through and what he's going to do. And that play, that lila, is how we learn and grow, and in some ways the joyful expression of the divine challenge to return to God. So I'll leave it there. I know that we have questions coming up, so I'll let your interests guide me forward, but hopefully that gives you a taste of some different aspects of the yugas.
Thank you, Puru. That was a wonderful little synopsis. That was a very tall order to have you do a really short talk about that. So, but I think you did a wonderful job. And yes, we will open for questions here, and we will be also going off of Facebook for our question and answer. So we invite any of our Facebook friends to come on to the rest of the satsang through our website. Just go out to our website. You can find the link to join us. But so let's go ahead. We'll come off Facebook. And anybody want to start off the questions? I'll hold back. I got a few, but I'm going to hold back here. And Stephanie and Hugh. So let's go with Hugh first, since he's unmuted, and then we'll go to you, Stephanie.
Hello, Puru. Thank you for stopping by, and incredible, amazing. I mean, yeah, you're right. This little taste is just not going to be enough. We're going to have you here. I'm part of the Ananda Dallas board of directors. We need to have you for a workshop, okay? Because we're just really, in 30 minutes, we're not going to be able to dive into much of the book. So maybe we can have you back.
There's a lot there. I'd be happy, genuinely more than happy to do a workshop. Might be easier if we can do a Zoom workshop, but let's see.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, please. Thank you. This is just like my top three, my top favorite books. This is like three, I got Autobiography of Yogi, Whispers, and the Yugas. But since you're here, something that really just always was in the back of my mind, even when I read the Autobiography of a Yogi many, many years ago. I've been with Ananda 2003. And that chapter where Sri Yukteswar does the little procession declaring that we are in Dwapara Yuga, it always just stayed with me thinking, oh my gosh, like there's 1 billion+ people, in India. and this is the storehouse of our spiritual legacy, those of us who follow Paramahansa Yogananda. And so what's it going to take? What's it going to take for, how are they going to come around and also, feel this and believe this? Oh, we're in Dwapara Yuga. And it's really interesting also the modern interplay. We had Sergio and Narayani on a couple of weeks ago on Zoom. And it was so funny because somebody posed that question too, does the average Indian, do you ever talk about the people coming into Ananda Cafe about this? We believe that we feel that we are in Dwapara Yuga, but everybody out in the street is in Kali Yuga. And he made a really comical expression like, no, we don't, talk to people and ask them, do you think that you're in Dwapara Yuga now when they come into the cafe? It was really funny just to see it play out in modern times. But my question is, what's it going to take? And maybe there's no answer right now. We're just getting started, 1900s Dwapara Yuga. What's it going to take? Is it going to take? We're exploding. Master's teachings are centers, in India, but compared to the vast population, what do you think it's going to take for people to come around there and one day say or realize or think, yeah, we're in Dwapara Yuga. Yes, Sri Dishwar, the Lion of India, he was right. Is it going to take for us to advance further into Dwapara Yuga, 1,000 years? Or is it going to take like 1,000 centers growing in India, Ananda or SRF, Yogananda's teachings? What do you think it's going to take for them to come around and say, yeah, we're in Dwapara Yuga?
Well, I think there's good news and there's bad news. I think the bad news is that, let me start with the good news. The good news is that the concept exists in India. The concept actually exists in other parts of the world, but it's not called the yugas. So for example, in Greece, we have the notion of the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. And even the Lakota Sioux had ages. So it was everywhere in the world in the previous descending Dwapara, previous descending Treta Yuga. It was known and understood because it was lived. It wasn't some obscure theory. It was something that was obvious to people that these ages behave the way they do. And so in India in particular, it has a very strong tradition. It's alive today much more than is the Greek Golden Age concept. It's thought to be just an interesting myth in Greece if it is talked about at all. But in India, it is still believed in. But unfortunately, it's from the point of view of what Sri Yukteswar says, it's erroneously believed in India, right? That they have this 432,000 year long Kali Yuga, and we're just getting started, and the whole cycle is in the millions of years. So that's the good news, it exists. The bad news is that I don't think Indian society is going to change any faster than any other part of the world. And it may end up being adopted more readily in the 24,000 year cycle that Sri Yukteswar is the exponent of, may end up being believed in the West before it cycles back to being believed in India. I'm just guessing, but cultural changes are perhaps the slowest kind of things to change. When you get new information coming in that doesn't conflict with old information, societies are much more willing to adopt it. But when you have new information coming in that conflicts with a strong other belief, it's slow. It's slow. And I would not be surprised if 1,000 years hence, you still have an entrenched group in India that believes in the longer cycle, just because of the nature, just because of human nature. But in other ways, it doesn't really matter. I mean, India is maybe not embracing changes in the notion of the yugas, but India is embracing their sort of a younger generation is embracing the teachings of yoga and meditation that the older generation really wasn't that interested in. So I think India could be at the forefront of this transformation that Master predicted, that there would be this unification of original yoga and original Christianity, and that Kriya Yoga would be practiced around the world. I could see India, because as you mentioned, the number of centers in India is just exploding, and they could probably have more centers than they have if they had more center leaders. And I think that's because there's a natural attunement to it to which there's no resistance. You know, it's not as if Hinduism has outlawed meditation. In America, we have a strong Christian right that outlaws meditation, says it's bad, it's negative, you shouldn't practice it. But in India, there is no sort of built-in resistance to yoga and meditation, and so the younger generation is coming in strongly to embrace it now. So I think India's a strong force for reawakening this whole concept of seeking God through experiential practices, and will influence the whole world. But the last thing to go may be the yugas. When Sri Yukteswar had a celebration, and in his Serampore hermitage by the seaside, a celebration of some change in, it could have been the change from Dwapara Yuga transition into Dwapara Yuga proper in 1900. It could have been something else, but at any rate, he had a procession that paraded down the streets of Serampore, celebrating this new transition that was predicted by his 24,000 year cycle. And people were throwing rocks at them because it went against the orthodox point of view that the cycle is millions of years long. So I don't have bright hope for a massive change in India, but winning minds one at a time, definitely, just like I think it would all over the world.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go to Stephanie, and then Mike Wolverton's got his hand up. So Stephanie, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Maitri. Welcome, Puru. My name's Stephanie, and my optimism has always imagined that there was something spiral about this procession of cycles of yugas. Is there anything in the Indian teachings that indicates that the next time the 4 cycles come through, it's somewhat vibrating higher? I imagine myself as a jiva, a soul back in a previous cycle, not being quite as enlightened, and that this time there's a reason why I've got a better chance of expanding my consciousness.
Right. Good question. It's one that I do get asked fairly often. But let me answer first questions you didn't directly ask, but I do want to stress them, which is that your evolution is independent of the yuga cycle. So even if you wanted to incarnate 100 years hence or 1,000 years hence, and this cycle on the earth was out of sync with what you needed, Master said there are other planets to be incarnated on, that you will be drawn wherever you need to go, that you neither go up or down in evolution in concert with the earth. So you will go where you need to go to grow. The masters will guide wherever you're going, and when you get there, you will get the information, you'll get the teachings, you'll get the challenges that you need to grow. But the bigger question you asked, or another question you asked, is, are the various 24,000 year cycles also spiraling upward in the same kind of way that we as a whole are now moving upward through ascending Dwapara Yuga? There's two answers to that, one good, one bad. The good one is there is a concept in Vedic teachings that there is a much, much bigger cycle. And it's even bigger than the millions of years cycle that Orthodox Hindus believe is true today. And it maybe even is in billions of years. In the scriptures, the Vedic scriptures, they don't say things like billions of years. It's not even a concept that goes in there. But the way in which they talk about it astrologically, it could be really large. And therefore, this notion that each individual 24,000 year cycle could be, kind of corkscrewing up that larger cycle of sort of a grand yuga, a Maha Yuga, if you will, is possible. So that's the good news. The bad news is that if it is a cycle, we could be corkscrewing down. So it doesn't automatically mean that it always goes up, because it is a cycle. I mean, everything in Vedic teachings and by extension our teachings is balanced. For every up, there's got to be a down. That essentially the dualistic nature of creation has to balance out to zero. There's no absolute pinnacle of development that you can have on in an imperfect world. That even Satya Yuga, not everyone is self-realized. It's an opportunity to become self-realized and never have to come back to the earth. But it's not just because it's a high age, you become self-realized. It's an opportunity, but not a guarantee. And then that cycle is just going to go down. It's going to create opportunities for people who need time in Treta Yuga or a descending Dwapara Yuga, etc. So it's a fascinating question, and obviously there are intriguing possibilities in Vedic scriptures that there is this much bigger cycle, and therefore our smaller cycle would have to be affected by it. But whether we're going up, going down, unknown. But the main thing to realize is that you'll always be incarnated exactly where you need to be. And you can just trust that. You don't have to be, well, it's not bad to be in a hurry to get realized, but you don't have to be in a hurry because you're going to miss the boat. and the cycle is going to start going down before you become realized. So thank you for your question.
All right, we'll go to Mike now. He has a question.
Thank you. And thank you, Puru, for being here today with us.
My pleasure.
Very enjoyable and stimulating. I had a similar question to Hugh. And I introduced my new question this way because sometimes thoughts are all around the world, can be from individuals, like inventions can be from many places at a time, Swami would tell us. And so the new question is, those that are maybe very involved with meditation, energization exercises, yoga, these things that we do, is it possible that in addition to experiencing energy more, that there's an opening even also to experience what you mentioned about thought more, like, this concept of thoughts can be around the world, and also even spiritually, because of our guidance to always listen to Master, always listen to God. So maybe this has also to do with what Stephanie was asking about in terms of an individual, but the question is, if there's a more of an understanding and appreciation and experience of energy, does that open these other doors to some extent also?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. And it, if I'd had more time in my talk I started with, I would have addressed this, because I think it sort of hints at why the yugas have different stages. But more importantly, I think the answer to your question is one of the main reasons why we practice yoga, and especially Kriya Yoga. And it's because the more we meditate, and especially the more we do Kriya Yoga, the more refined our nervous systems become. And the more refined our nervous systems become, the bigger spiritual experience we can have, that you've probably read in the Path or in other books, where disciples asked Master to give them samadhi. And obviously, if Master could give it to you, you'd probably want it. But his answer to one, with sort of the comical answer, was, if I gave it to you, could you handle it? And the person had to, sort of admit sheepishly that they probably couldn't handle it. And Master often also said in other contexts that it would burn your nervous system to handle that much energy. So as we practice Kriya Yoga and as we practice meditation, we're refining our nervous system to handle greater and greater amounts of power, because the more subtle the perception, the higher the level of energy that we're working on. And the higher the level of energy we're working on, the more energy is pouring through our nervous system. So to be able to perceive thoughts and communicate telepathically would require a significant refinement of the nervous system. And the more we experience the fringes of God, the more that refines our nervous system, and the more we can feel it. So it's a beneficial circle that we get going. So how I think this relates to the yugas is that I think in Sri Yukteswar's description of why the earth goes through these cycles, is that we get closer to and farther from the grand central sun, as he called it, the seat of Brahma. And that as we get closer to it, the energy levels on earth increase. And then as we get farther away, the energy levels on earth decrease. So I've thought about that for a very long time and wondered, well, just because the energy levels are increasing or decreasing, or because there's more influence of Brahma, what does that really mean? And what I think, coupling it with Master describing Kriya as refining the nervous system, is that I think when you're born in Treta Yuga, you're born with a more refined nervous system, because the energy level of all matter is vibrating at a higher level. And therefore, when you're born into Satya Yuga, you're born with an even more refined nervous system. And in both cases, you're able to handle innately, naturally, without thinking about it, higher levels of consciousness, and therefore higher levels of perception and ability.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I think that was it. I was trying to think if there was another point to add to that, but I think that was it. So thank you for the question.
You're welcome. Do you think that there is a dual that has a shape of perhaps a toroid, given that the sun has moves in a figure 8 pattern, which also could be viewed as the infinity symbol? Is it possible, like the cross section of a donut, a toroid shape, that the dual is not just something round? That, or what is your concept right now? And where have you gotten to in terms of what a dual is?
Well, if you've read the Yugas, you probably read Vyasa's chapter about an alternative to a gravitational dual. If you haven't, I really recommend it. Basically, what he was saying, and I agree with him, is that the candidates, the possibilities for there being a gravitational body that we don't know of yet, that is big enough to perturb the earth, the sun rather, perturb the, what am I trying to say, the orbit of the sun enough that there's a 24,000 year do-si-do with another body. It's looking slimmer and slimmer. Unless there are laws of gravitation, which we are completely unaware of, which is possible. And, there are people who are aficionados of the yugas who suggest that we're just looking at gravity the wrong way, and that there are bodies that we're doing this with already, we just don't realize it. So I don't want to eliminate that possibility, but the one that most of us think of when we think of the dual, we think of something like a brown dwarf, a star mass, but a star mass that has no light. It never ignited, even though it was big enough to be a star, and that is, if we can discover it someday, going to explain that we have some sort of cycle around it, a do-si-do type dance. But Vyasa, who is an astronomer and has put a tremendous amount of thought into it, has just become skeptical that is really the answer. And he looked for deeper and more subtle answers to what the dual could be. And he came up with what I call the astrological explanation for the dual, rather than a gravitational explanation. So all Sri Yukteswar says is that we revolve around a dual. He said, literally, the language that is used is that the sun takes some star for its dual. And as Vyasa likes to point out, that seems rather casual. Could our sun have taken some other star if it felt like it? What does that mean? And then we have the precession of the equinox, which is a retrograde motion that we go sort of backwards through the signs of the zodiac, because our what we see at sunrise on the equinoxes in the star field behind us moves. Those stars are not the same year after year when we observe on June 21st. And we go backwards through the signs of the zodiac in a revolution that is 26,200 years, I think. So it's very close to Sri Yukteswar's 24,000 years. Sri Yukteswar does say also that the 24,000 years is approximate. So although he gives very, very precise years and lengths of time, he does say it's approximate. So these are, you know, little indicators that there could possibly be some wiggle room to associate the cycle more specifically to the precession of the equinoxes. And then the last part of this, hopefully I haven't lost everybody except you. The Earth has an axial tilt. And it's not a given that a planet will have an axial tilt. And if it does have an axial tilt, it could be much greater or much smaller than ours. But our axial tilt, if you, I don't know if you can see me on camera. Yes, I see you can. Imagine that my fist is the Earth and my thumb is the line of the axial tilt. As we go through the backwards precession of the equinoxes, the wobble of the Earth carves out a cone, an imaginary cone in the sky. And that what it means is that at any given time, the axial tilt of the Earth is pointing at a different place out in space. So what Vyasa is theorizing is that the center of that cone that's carved out by that movement, the center of that cone, there's a star that is our dual. And therefore we're rotating around the dual in a 24,000, approximately 24,000 year cycle. So if all that is true, why do we rise and fall in consciousness? And this is the piece that I find most intriguing. And I'll take us to an analogy of a crystal radio. So a crystal radio can tune into very specific frequencies. But in order to tune into those frequencies, the crystal has to be physically moved, because the crystal will vibrate at different frequencies as you move it physically. Now you're moving it against a coil, and that's part of the story of why it's vibrating. But nonetheless, there's a physical movement and a change in frequency. And when you change frequencies, you pull in different radio stations. So Vyasa is suggesting, and this is the part I love, is that as the Earth's wobble changes orientation, it actually changes the entire frequency of the Earth, like that crystal in the radio. And that the influence that's coming to us from the grand central sun is constant, but we metaphorically get closer to its vibration and farther from its vibration, in the same way that a crystal gets closer to being attuned to a particular radio station, or farther from being attuned to a particular radio station. And that's the revolution, and that's the 24,000 years. And that's why consciousness rises and falls on the Earth. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share that one. I think it's a fun one, and not many people know it as well as they might. You know, aficionados of the yugas don't know it as well as they might.
Thank you, Puru. That was very nerdy of you.
I thought it was. Hopefully, people weren't going out for coffee there at that point, but it's possible.
I'm going to put a plug in for the fact that there are a few of us Yuga nerds on here. We have taken the Nanda College class with Vyasa and have monthly satsangs with Vyasa around the yugas because we were just so fascinated with them. And so I encourage people to also look at Ananda College, and you can join in the nerdiness with us if you want. And of course, we would love to have you come again. I forgot to mention that you were here years ago. I can't remember. It was probably a decade ago, right?
Yeah, it could easily be that long ago.
Yeah. We did have you here, and it was wonderful, and we can never get enough of you and the yugas for sure. Let me see if there's anybody else, and then I'm still holding off on a couple questions I have. But is anybody else want to jump in there? Because I know it's really easy to get involved and want to ask a question. So anybody will just pause for a moment. Maybe not. Maybe they've gotten their fill.
I didn't get my fill. I have another one, but I'm going to wait for you to go because it won't be fair.
Well, I have a question too. So.
Okay. Well, we'll let Mark go, and then we'll go around. But people, you can raise your hands, put it in the chat, whatever, and we'll go from there. So go ahead, Mark.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say that to me, there are so many things that make it pretty self-evident that we're in an age of energy. I mean, there's the Einstein, the theory of relativity, and all the things that have happened within our within science. But the other thing that I think about is the fact that here we are. Yogananda came to the United States in the early 20s, and he was born right at that transition time between Kali and Dwapara. And it seems to me and also Kriya Yoga is something that's been around for tens of thousands, maybe millions of years, but Yogananda brought something unique, and that was the energization exercises. And so it seems to me that it's a really important technique for this age that we're in. I just wondered if you would comment on that some.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it is a unique new science. And Master said several times that he said the benefits of this new science will have inestimable value for mankind. And he didn't necessarily mean today, but or even when he launched it, but that over time they would be as important as yoga postures, probably more important than yoga postures, and up there with meditation and Kriya Yoga. So it is interesting, though, that it would be introduced now, right, in this time, and that it wasn't already conceived of by an earlier master or an earlier incarnation of master in, say, Kali Yuga, when people would have been unlikely to be interested in it. But I think they are really powerful. As I said during my talk, just briefly, Master said by practicing them, it's not just that they increase health. It's not just that they give you more energy to do things and accomplish things, but that you can actually begin to realize, as in the same term as self-realized, you can actually realize that you are pure life force, that you are not a physical thing at all, that your true energy nature. And that's part of how we graduate, right? We're all here in the school of learning to transcend physical attachments, physical perception, transcend this false sense of separation from God. And we have to keep those lessons keep going, even in the astral regions and even into the causal regions. But we graduate from this particular school when we are able to comprehend the physical body as being, part of God's dream, and to see the mechanism of the dream. And the mechanism of the dream is that life force is constantly creating the physical body. So if you can realize that through just the energization exercises, it's a huge help to then being able to experience it also in meditation. So it is indeed powerful. And over the years, I've been doing the energization exercises literally now for 50 years. And, I never ended up being like the mighty Adam or Charles Atlas. It didn't make me like super buff or incredibly strong or able to do amazing physical feats. But it definitely increased my awareness of life force. And as I do them now, and I'm assuming that even this perception is going to improve the longer I do them. But as I do them now, I can just feel life force flowing into my body. It's not I don't have to visualize it as light or visualize it and imagine it. I actually feel life force coming from the medulla and pouring into my body. And it's wonderful. It's like having joy pour into your body, right? So they are powerful and extremely helpful.
Thank you for that.
I wanted to just take us back around for a moment to the yuga that we're in now and the challenges we have, and sort of the way we as devotees, maybe some of the dangers, and this is for everyone, but for all of us that are striving to tune into higher consciousness and to transcend some of our limitations, etc. It seems that, it's almost, we say age of energy, but we could also say age of ego, right? Because it's so, that empowerment that can come to individuals. You see it in the media, you can become an influencer now, in all these different ways that our egos, can be gratified through the forms of energy that have now been manifested in our channels for us, and we can be channels for all these different thoughts and whatnot. But it seems the danger is that we have to really watch. And I mean, even as a devotee, the ego is a very subtle thing, and just wondered if you wanted to comment on that some more. I mean, I think we all saw that so clearly during the pandemic, where, everybody's in a different place, with their karma, with their consciousness, but how we can sort of, work again with, these turbulent times and not maybe be so caught in just those traps of ego too. It's a mouthful.
Yes. Well, I like your phrase, the age of ego. It's it's very apt, unfortunately. But I think maybe it's the age of accentuating the ego, strengthening the ego. Swami used to say that people in Kali Yuga don't actually have as big egos as we have in Dwapara Yuga. That you might think they should have even bigger egos than we have, because they're, that Kali Yuga stage is even less spiritually evolved than we are now. But his point was that developing the ego is a natural stage of spiritual development, as well as something that, we see people using erroneously, getting themselves into a lot of trouble. But the key to the spiritual ego, if you want, or spiritualizing the ego, is recognizing that you have an ego, first to begin with, but wanting to expand the ego into greater and greater awareness, as opposed to the mainstream is wanting to kind of merge the ego with sensory pleasures and with possessions, which are just kind of a step away from sensory pleasures. They take almost sensory pleasure in having things. And then the ego battleground of trying to control the world to their own likes and dislikes. All of those things are, they're going to end up in trouble. Sooner or later, all of those things are going to lead to unhappiness. But that's what we do. If we don't try to do anything, we don't make any mistakes. So people who are not even wanting to be on the spiritual path, have no interest in the spiritual path, are still sort of just learning by trial and error. And that's what they need to do, because they're in that Vaishya stage of development. So it's not necessarily a hideous, amoral expression of humanity that shouldn't be allowed. It is just naturally how people learn. And if they make enough attempts to find happiness through all those things, then eventually they're going to say, some incarnations down the line, something's not working here. maybe I need to be a little kinder, or maybe I need to do something for others. And then that becomes an experiment. And through the actual direct experience of that experiment, people, we all go where it's real for us, right? No matter how much I might say to you, if you have a different experience than I do, you're going to follow your own experience. You might be willing to experiment in the direction of master's teachings, but if you still don't have that experience, you're still going to be led by what makes it real for you. And that's just the way we are. So for the spiritual ego, I think you just have to accept that you have an ego. We can create I believe, a kind of false persona where we think, we believe, and we say to people that, well, I'm not acting out of ego here. Or, I don't want to act out of ego, so I'm not going to do this. You're always going to act out of ego. Just accept it. It's not like you can just, by wishing, not have an ego. Ego is the consciousness of separateness from God. That's it. And even very, very high beings who are, Satya Yuga level type beings still have some ego. So what I always try to say and always try to do is just, I don't sweat the fact that I have an ego. I don't wake up thinking, oh, here I am, this guy with an ego, what am I going to do? I just know I have an ego, but what I try to do is use the ego in a way that will help me eventually not have an ego. And that's all I can do. Swami used the example of sometimes, if you don't have any other options and you get a thorn stuck in you, you can use another thorn to get the first thorn out, right? You use it as a tool. And so if you didn't have an ego, you'd be back to being a dog or, a dolphin or a whale or whatever, because they don't tend to have egos. But once you have an ego, then you can take charge of your own development. You can take charge and smash into walls. You can take charge and do horrible things. And we've all done it. I mean, I sometimes really don't want to know what all my past lifetimes were like. I might find it really uncomfortable to see, because we've all just made horrendous mistakes. But in all cases, it's the ego thinking, I can find happiness this way. So circling back maybe to the beginning of your question, Maitri, is that, again, that's maybe a gift of Dwapara Yuga, is that we do have stronger egos. And we have examples around us, ironically, we have examples around us of people developing their egos, which is not a bad thing. Many spiritual teachings, which I think fall short of being complete spiritual teachings, but many spiritual teachings are about attaining prosperity or attaining health, and that's their focus. I think they fall short because they don't really say as strongly as they could that what you're going to discover when you find health is that the powers of health are coming from God and that you're part of God. But even if they don't, even if it's just using your ego, using your concentration, putting your heart and energy into becoming more prosperous, you're growing. And oftentimes, if it is a spiritually based group that's talking about prosperity, they're going to talk about, giving, that thinking of other people as part of that prosperity, and you're going to grow. So even though we have, dare I say, Donald Trump as an example, we have an example of somebody who used tremendous willpower, and whatever else you got to say about the guy, he has tremendous willpower to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. And so we have all these examples, and we have, books written about what did they do and why did they do it and what did they say was secret of their success. And we can, just kind of absorb this mass of information and apply it to spiritual advancement, because in a very real way, it's the same tools. It's concentration, it's use of willpower, it's focus, it's energy. Take all those things and give Trump a spiritual focus, and he might go far, right? He's just dedicated to the wrong things, and he's crashing into the wall and crashing a lot of other people into the wall with him. But it's an impersonal lesson that we can take from anybody who's successful and apply it more personally to what will make us spiritually successful. Did I cover everything, Maitri? I wasn't sure if I missed the core intent of your question.
You got it in the kernel there. In the essence, for us as devotees, I think is we can use we don't want to like badmouth our ego. We need ego to find God, but how we go about using the ego is instead of to have that awareness of not having our energy consolidating around us, but be expansive in nature through our service and through sharing. And that leads me to one other little question, and then we'll leave it to other people, which goes back to years ago with you when we first when we first met in Seattle. You and Lakshmi followed Pranaba and Parvati up to Seattle. And you guys came with an entourage of kiddos, and Lakshmi was pregnant. And, now my son's in college and everything. But, on a practical level, for all of us as devotees, you you were serving to your capacity as a center leader, to a very active center with a lot of family duties. How did you balance that, and what can you say to encourage all of us? Because I'll have to say that a lot of us sort of tend to go, well, I got all these family commitments here, you know, and I want to just say you're a shining example of that. And if you have any words of wisdom on how to be expansive in that way and keep that balance, because that was a tough one, I can imagine.
It was tough. You know, I often think that those times were the most challenging times in my life. And they lasted for, you know, when Lakshmi and I married, she already had 2 children, 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. And then we had 2 more children. So we had a span of like a 14-year-old to a newborn, which meant that we had kids with us for a very long time. And when our youngest child finally left home, we went off on a vacation, and we realized that Lakshmi had been a mom for 33 straight years.
Wow.
So it was extremely challenging. I'm glad I was a shining example. I didn't always feel like a shining example. And I think maybe that could be among the most helpful things I could say, which is that you just do it. And you may not feel like you're doing it at all well. And if you compare yourself to others who seem to be doing it better, you might end up feeling like you're just, you know, a failed devotee, or you just can't do those kind of things that other people can do. And I had similar thoughts. You know, I looked to people who I thought were, you know, super families, and I just thought, you know, how do they do that? I can't do that. Just do your best. There's no, and that I think is also true of any really challenging time in your life, is to just do your best. And it's okay to have goals. You probably should have goals. You know, you want to, in fact, maybe you always want to do better than you're doing. And I think that's good. But not get caught by your own goals, and therefore think that if you're not meeting the better, that what you're doing is no good. So it was very hard. Lakshmi and I, my wife Lakshmi and I, often say to each other when we're, you know, we know a friend's having a hard time, or particularly another family situation is challenging, we just say to each other, you know, it's really hard being a human. And it is. Do not be surprised especially if you're a young family, that you're going to feel like you're just not rising to the level you want to rise. But periodically, at least, remember to pat yourself on the back for just showing up. Just keep showing up as much as you can. And sometimes if you show up tired, that's okay. If sometimes you show up, you're moody, that's okay. And sometimes you show up and you're angry, that's okay. Don't retreat. Don't self-define yourself as, I'm not the kind of person who can do this, or I'm just not a very good parent, or whatever you might come up with. Just keep showing up. Don't define it. Don't overthink it. And do the best you can. You grow tremendously from it. I can say that without any doubt, that they were the most challenging years in my life, but they also were the most growthful. And I came out of them, you know, when the kids went, and we didn't have anybody at home, it felt like, you know, the balloon weights had been dropped, and I was able to soar into other things that I hadn't been able to do with a lot more skills and energy and concentration that I had developed from just showing up through parenthood. So it's a long cycle. That's the other thing I always tried to tell people and try to remember myself is life is long. Kids aren't going to be with you forever. The challenges you're meeting now are not going to always be forever. Just keep showing up. Love God as much as you can. My meditation got hammered when I had kids, and I didn't get to meditate anywhere near as much as I thought I should or would. And even as a minister, you know, I'm showing up to give Sunday service, as Maitri was alluding, and I'm the minister, and I'm doing the best I can. I'm showing up, but I know in the back of my mind that I haven't meditated in 4 days. So just do the best you can. And it will be transformative. It will be helpful. It'll especially broaden your heart, which is very key to meditating, finding God. Do your best.
Well, I hear the word willingness with that too. You were willing and you showed up.
That's it. I mean, you got to keep showing up. If you don't show up and you start to retreat from it, I think you either need to reorganize what it is that you're doing that you think you're not able to show up to. And it could be your own self-generated goals that you're not showing up to, in which case you need to give yourself permission to change those goals and just give yourself another set of goals that you can show up for as best as possible. But don't set yourself up to be constantly feeling like you're a failure as a parent or as a person or as a devotee. If you go there, you need help. Talk to Maitri, talk to anyone who is a good friend who can help you reorient your attitudes, really, because you will not help yourself if you do that too much.
Well, thank you for that. Now, I know we're going long here, but Hugh did say he had another question. Do you still have that burning question? And are you still willing to hang out with us a little bit longer? Thank you so much. So go ahead,
Yes.
Hugh.
Thanks, Puru. I had this question since I read the book a few years ago, so it's a blessing and honor that you get to come in and answer it. And I don't know it can be answered. It's just an exciting time. I know probably more so for Vyasa, he's an astronomer, but given, say, in astronomy, the developments, you know, you have the James Webb Telescope going out there to the farthest reaches, the most advanced telescope in optics that is going to be able to peer into other galaxies, right? But my question's related to, and bring it back to our galaxy, where we talked about in the beginning of the cycle of the yugas, and we alluded to this earlier, the central, our central star that Sri Yukteswar talks about has a name, Vishnu Navi. And you mentioned it right from the beginning of the book, the seat of the creative power, Brahma, universal magnetism. Okay. And then he goes on, he talks about it's from the science of religion, Sri Yukteswar. But then you also talk about, and astronomers know that at the center of most galaxies, there exist black holes. And so you talk about that in the other page, where the black holes in the center of our galaxy is not the result of our galaxy forming, but rather a significant cause of our galaxy forming. And that always caught me, this idea, Vishnu Navi, the great central sun, pouring forth all this. Can't imagine the amount of energy pouring forth that reaches the earth in order to influence our dharma, our consciousness. But at the same time, you have a black hole there. Okay, and that even has a name now. It's been studied since the 80s, but pictures actually came out this past May with the other telescope. I forget what it was called. I forget what it's called. But it's a whole team with the telescope. They got a picture of the black hole at the center of our galaxy called Sagittarius A. I mean, it's just boggling. You know, like for those of us who are aficionados, 4 million times the mass of the sun, 16 million miles in diameter, the event horizon. So my question is, how do those two coexist? I mean, you have the outpouring of energy from Vishnu Navi. It gives us consciousness and Dharma, but then you have the black hole sucking in all matter around it, even light. And how I'm having a hard time reconciling those two astrological events. I was wondering if you could just help me a little bit with that.
Well, I mean, take a step back from your question. It's a good question. And point out that when Sri Yukteswar was talking about Vishnu Navi, the seat of Brahma, the notion that there was a galaxy, let alone hundreds of millions of galaxies, didn't even exist. The universe as it was understood at that time was just an undifferentiated mass of stars. And there were, in their conceptions, there were no galaxies. So in our modern day, we're quick to think that the seat of Brahma is the seat of our galaxy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so. It could be so. It could be another example of Sri Yukteswar's, foresight that, he couldn't say in so many words at the time when he wrote the book, but that was what he was describing. So it can't be ruled out, but there's also the possibility that the seat of Brahma is entirely elsewhere, and that this seat of creative power could be in another galaxy outside of our galaxy. And that it could be, instead of, we're edge on to our galactic disk, right? Because we're out in one of the arms. So what we're seeing when we are able to take these amazing infrared shots of the black hole in the center of our galaxy is we're seeing it from the plane of the ecliptic. But there are other views of galaxies, which I'm sure you are aware of now, that the black holes have jets. And you can see these jets coming out in the rotational axis of the black hole. So if it were if our galaxy has jets, which it probably does, but I don't know if they've proved it yet, those jets would be going away from us. And they are the most powerful, energetic expression of anything in the entire galaxy that astronomers and physicists have been able to know and discover. So what if the seat of Brahma that is affecting us is a jet from another galaxy and not our galaxy altogether? Or what if there are sort of local arrangements of stars that aren't gravitational, and that, as some people have suggested, Sirius is actually the seat, the Vishnu Navi, the seat of Brahma that affects us, and that there could be more than one seat. Obviously, if it were the center of our gravity, that would suggest that there are 100 million seats of Brahma in the universe. So I don't have an answer to which one it is. There's also an argument that has been made by people that the seat of Brahma is astral, that the in most spiritual teachings, most experiential spiritual teachings, there's this notion of as above, so below, that the physical universe is a expression of a subtler heavenly astral universe, and that it's the perfect astral universe is actually projecting the energy and the intelligence to form our physical and less perfect universe, and that the seat of Brahma is actually not in the physical realm at all, but in the astral. So I'm tossing all these out to you, not because I have really any idea which one is the right answer, but just to say it doesn't have to be the center of the galaxy. If it were the center of the galaxy, whatever that black hole is doing, it's got to be throwing off as it eats stars. It throws off energy. It's not all the energy is eaten and it enlarges the event horizon of the black hole, but that light never comes back out of the black hole, but some does. And a vast majority of that goes out in the jets that are perpendicular to the plane, but much of it also is thrown off of the rotational spin of the black hole, which is in alignment with the plane of the ecliptic. So it could still be a candidate. What I question about just about any of these ideas, except the astral one, is that they all suggest that the energy rises and falls. So our black hole at the center of our galaxy doesn't have a steady diet of stars. It'll have none for a while, and it'll have 100 as they get gravitationally sucked in and then end up spinning around it at just phenomenal speeds and finally getting sucked into it. And it's then that they notice this great, explosion of energy coming out of the black hole. So if it goes up and down, that doesn't seem like a very good candidate for Sri Yukteswar's description of what sounds like a very steady influence. We get closer to it, we get farther away, but he talks about it as if it's gone on for, and Master even said it's been going on for millions of years, the 24,000 year cycle. So that might also eliminate, jets coming from other galaxies, because they might wax or wane. So we may just be looking in the wrong place for what that is. And as I was talking about with the axis of the Earth causing this cone to form and attuning us to that power in more and more, exact attunement to the frequency, like finding the radio station with the crystal radio, that also suggests that it's a very steady energy that is coming, that we could need that precise, that tight of a tuning into in order to draw in that higher and more subtle energy to transform the earth and transform the bodies that people are incarnating into. So I kind of like the astral idea, but I have no idea what that mechanism would be and how it would be seen that we're rotating around it. But so I answered your question with 7 or 8 non-answers, I'm afraid, but that's the best I can do.
Thank you, Puru. And I think in closing, it would be nice to just know, what is it that you're up to these days? You've you know, you're pretty prolific in what you do. So what's the latest? And maybe we'll wrap it up with that question.
All right. Well, you should always be wary about asking an author what they're up to. But it's too late to take it back. So as you know, I wrote the Yuga some time ago. That came out in 2010. And then as my business life was wrapping up and I was able to retire and I was doing less and less, I have been and still am working part-time for Ananda's IT department. But that has given me more time to write. So in 2017, I came out with The Physics of God. And The Physics of God has been doing very well. It's available in paperback, Kindle, and especially Audible audiobook. And over half of sales are Audible books. People apparently now, I think it's probably because of the ubiquity of cell phones, that people listen to audiobooks a lot because you sort of just have them wherever you are, right? And because of that, it has done really well. Since then, I have written another book, which is called Break Through the Limits of the Brain. And it's all about neuroscience and what neuroscience tells us about essentially how the brain just becomes this gigantic block to us being able to perceive anything other than sensory information. And it kind of gets us locked into thinking that we are physical bodies and that the physical world around us is all there is, because that's all we perceive. But we've done that to ourselves. We've done that to ourselves unintentionally. We've wired our brains to operate in this world. And in order to operate in this world, we need to know what the senses are telling us, and we need to know what the body's up to. And eventually, as adults, we don't, without an intention to do it, we don't tend to perceive anything else. Unlike when we were children, a lot of really young children perceive subtle realities like angels, like fairies, like astral lights. And then they gradually get talked out of it, right? Because parents are afraid their child is unusual in a bad way or whatever. But eventually we just wire our brains for only that kind of awareness. So I talk a lot about that in the book. That's just a nutshell. And then most of the book is how do you rewire your brain? And for those of us who are already on a spiritual path, those of us who meditate, we're already rewiring our brains. So every time we sit down to meditate, we are reinforcing the rewiring we've already done. And Kriya Yoga is like the super tool for rewiring the brain, because it generates the most energy that takes us out of sensory awareness. So we're doing everything we need to do to rewire the brain. But for people, and this is to whom the book is aimed, who don't already meditate, or if they meditate, they may not really fully understand why they're meditating or what meditation can do for them. This is a book that helps them understand how there can be subtle realities that they're not already experiencing, right? You know, you tell somebody, well, you're one with God and you're full of energy and joy bursts out of your heart and you're full of love. And, you know, I think of my dad and he'd just go, right. You might think I'm that, but I don't think I'm that. I don't experience that. And the brain that is wired for sensory experience is really the explanation. So that book's coming out this fall, and I'm starting to do more and more promo for that. Meanwhile, since that is just coming out, I've had a gap and I wrote another book, and this book is just being submitted to the publisher now. And this one is called, I can try out my title on you guys. If there's any of you left, you can vote for whether you like this title. But the title at the moment is The Science of Miraculous Health. Got thumbs up there, another thumbs up. Everyone else appears to have. Yeah, okay, good. Stephanie gives me 2 thumbs up. Well, that's good. No thumbs down, no bemused shaking of the head. So this is very much a third book in that series, so to speak. There's Physics of God, there's Breaking Through the Limits of the Brain, and then there is this, which is focused on health and how we can use deeper soul powers in a way that seems miraculous to science, to hard material science, but is in fact the way the body operates all the time. We're just not consciously using it. We are walking miracles, but most people don't realize that. And even if you think it and realize it, you don't necessarily take charge of what it is that your soul powers are doing to affect your body and health. So that's the point of the next book. All of these, just to give one last perspective on what I'm doing and why I write these books. Master once described his whole purpose in coming to America and to starting this work as reinterpreting the scriptures and spreading Kriya Yoga. And the reinterpreting the scriptures is sort of been stated in another way, which is to reunite original yoga and original Christianity, because Master didn't really try to reinterpret the Buddhist scriptures or any others. He focused on Christianity and yoga and Vedic teachings. But his reinterpretation was profoundly important, because what he wanted to do and did do wonderfully was to say there's a universal spiritual truth that unites them both. That when Christ said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the light," he wasn't making a statement of the superiority of Christianity to all other religions, which is how it gradually was interpreted. He was saying that when you rise into Christ consciousness, when you become the Christ, then you come unto God. And the only way to come unto God is through Christ consciousness. So all of these very key ways in which Master reinterpreted the scriptures have had a huge impact on the whole spiritual but not religious movement in America and all over the world. Is that people want to be universal and they want to be experiential. They get much more out of it. So why am I talking about this? One of the other things that Master did, but didn't say was really a part of his main mission, was that he reinterpreted the sciences. So in the autobiography of a yogi, he devotes an entire chapter to what he called the law of miracles, which allowed him to compare the relativity and the behavior of light and the speed of light, was able to compare that to the consciousness of a master, a realized master. And then he also had the chapter on Jagadish Bose, who had all the instruments they invented and showed that there, as Master put it, the frontier between inanimate and animate is going away, it's blurring. And so he would allude to these things in all of his writings, but he didn't really make it a mission. So I became very, very inspired by the notion of, because I had the interest to begin with, but inspired with the notion of continuing that and making it my mission. And so all of these books reinterpret the sciences. And what do I mean by reinterpret? The current interpretation of almost all scientific discovery is materialistic. It's all of those discoveries are used to say, there, you see, it's all, the brain is just a machine, and life evolved out of a puddle of ooze, and consciousness exists only inside the brain. And these are all material interpretations of discoveries that have been made. And the discoveries themselves don't say one thing or the other, right? The discoveries of science are just completely neutral. They don't automatically have to be interpreted in a material way. And so I'm by far and away not the only and not the first of hundreds of authors who have gone in this way that's kind of called the new science of reinterpreting the discoveries of science to show that there are more subtle interpretations possible from the same discoveries. Those same discoveries can point to consciousness, like the core discovery of quantum physics, that there has to be an intelligent observer in order for matter to behave like matter. This is pretty profound, but it just gets glossed over by the materialists. And on and on. As I say, it's always dangerous to ask an author what he's doing. And I don't want to keep going into it, but I think that there are a lot of books being written that venture into this direction, and they're making dents in materialism, but they don't necessarily connect the dots to God and subtle consciousness, God and higher consciousness, and your own experience that is being talked about with science. And that's my mission, is to reinterpret the sciences so they highlight the presence of God and the nature of the soul. And it's really, for me, it's super inspiring.
Well, it's super inspiring for us. I've enjoyed every single one of your books, including your novels. So, you didn't mention those, but.
Well, the novels, I don't know how many people are still listening. May only be like 4 of you. But the novels, if you have read them, you would know that there was a novel 1 and novel 2. And because they're fantasy, they're just irresistibly crying out for a 3rd one, because you can't write anything that isn't a trilogy or longer. And so I did write it. It does exist, but I decided to just collapse them all into one book.
Oh.
So there now is just a single book, and it's out to publishers to see if I can find a publisher for it. It's not looking good, and I may end up just offering it for free on my website. I wrote it so people could enjoy it. I mean, if I could make some money on it, I would, but more, I just wanted people to enjoy seeing our teachings wrapped in a fantasy environment.
And as I recall, the novels are under a pen name, is that right?
Say again?
The novels are under a pen name, is that correct?
The first one was, and then I went back to Joseph Selbie. It's a long and torturous history of why. And now the 3rd one is back to a pen name, but a different pen name.
Oh, no.
Just to really confuse people. Well, there's not that many people to confuse. I think at best, I sold about 500 copies of both books, maybe 1,000 combined. And so I figured, well, if I do confuse people, I'm not going to confuse that many people. But as I say, I think I'm just going to put it out on my website. And if I do, I'll probably just go back to Joseph Selbie as the author name.
Your website address is?
you can get to it at joseph@josephselby.com. Or that's the email address. Thank you. Sorry, but www.josephselby.com.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, we thank you for taking all this time and hanging out with us. I mean, it's blazing hot here. There's nothing else. We can't go out. We can't play. We can't, we're all stuck inside. And so it's been wonderful to have you, just help us while away the day, so to speak, and here in Texas. But it's just great to see you. It's just wonderful to connect. Thank you for being so willing to come on and share with us. And we have the way we close out our Satsangs is got the unique Texas stamp. And we're going to ask everybody to open up their cameras if you're still there. Open your cameras so we can do it. And your microphone, too, if you want. And we're going to just say goodbye by saying, Namaste, y'all. So thank you
Well,
again.
it's been my pleasure. And don't be shy about asking me to do other things. As I say, in this miraculous day and age of Zoom, it's a lot easier than flying to Dallas. And
It is
spending
easier,
3
but
days and flying back.
We're craving the in-person too, and we're searching for a new center. So
Yeah, I got that. I heard your affirmation, so I
yeah,
hope you find it soon.
yeah, we're working on it and looking around. We're hoping to even purchase something after all these years being here, nearly 30 years. We're hoping maybe we can do that, but it's just sort of the crazy times we're in. But in the meantime, we're doing retreats, and we are renting a spot and doing some in person, but we're not by any stretch fully back in person until we find a physical space again. But
Yeah.
we'll definitely keep you in mind. We would love to bring you, and maybe we can figure out a Zoom thing. But it's just, thank you so much for your generous time today in being with us. So we hope.
My
wish you
pleasure, truly.
well. God bless, and bye everybody. Stay cool. We'll
Namaste, y'all.
yeah,
Namaste,
namaste, y'all.